Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Awesome C.O.D.Y. As usual, I'm your host, C.O.D.Y, and today we are wrapping up March's theme of awesome space movies that are sort of kind of thrillers also. I don't know. Awesome space movies is all I really had. So today we're talking about the 2018 science fiction film called Prospect. Prospect is written and directed by Zeke Earl and Chris Caldwell, two dudes who are partners in crime. Have only made short films before this, including Prospect as a short film, which I have never seen. And then they did this little thing here. It was small release through Regal Cinemas, which is a regional chain in many places in the country. Don't think there's any near me anymore. There were when I lived in California, but not in Arizona. I don't think there's any Regal Cinemas here. If there are, they're super far away from me. Anyhow, actually, matter of fact, is there? No, it was a Harkins. I don't know. I don't think I could look it up. I'm not gonna. Anyhow, so this movie stars mainly two people, but it has a cast of credited as six people. There are more in it, but I'm pretty sure they don't count since they don't really have lines or you don't really see their faces so much. Anyhow, the two mains are Sophie Thatcher as C and Pedro Pascal as Ezra. The other one I would say would be a more recognizable name would be Jay Duplass. Jay is fairly well known. He and his brother are a pretty big producing, directing, writing duo. I think it's just the two of them. But anyways, acting wise, Jay you would recognize if you watched Transparent on Amazon Prime. He was also he was awarded something or other for that thing too, I think. But his brother Mark was one of the driving forces behind The League. Sorry, I was reading something offhandedly. The League, which was a show on FX a couple years ago. He, like I said, he's written and directed a couple things. I've only seen one of them. Yeah. Which is Jeff Who Lives at Home from a bunch of years ago. If you don't know what that one is, it has it was directed by him and his brother, and then written by both of them, right? Yeah. But it has Jason Segel and Ed Harris, Judy Greer, Susan Sarandon. Anyways, I'm not talking about that movie tonight. But yeah, that's that one. I never saw Cyrus. I never saw The Puffy Chair, even though I guess that's the one that kind of like gave him his like jump start or whatever. But anyhow, acting wise, the biggest things you could pinpoint him being in would be, well, actually, he hasn't had any big roles in anything really other than Transparent. He was in that for 5 seasons. He was in Room 104. I didn't know that. But yeah, anyways, that's Jay Duplass, brother of Mark Duplass, or Duplass. I'm not too sure. I was saying it's Duplass, but whatever. Yeah, he has a bit part in it as Damon. But Sophie Thatcher as C, she has been in a few things. She's fairly new. She's only been acting for about 4 or 5 years now. She had a one episode of Chicago PD, 4 episodes of Chicago Med, a feature film, which I don't know if I've ever heard of, called The Tomorrow Man, which is a very depressing sounding movie, by the way. When I read the description, doesn't matter. I'm not talking about it today. And then then she was in this Prospect, obviously. And then Pedro Pascal, who I adore and everything he does. He's such a weird dude, but best noted for being nowadays being in The Mandalorian, but before that being in Game of Thrones. He got his face crushed in by the mountain, and also he killed the mountain technically. But he is he's been in a lot of things. He obviously, like I said, he was he was in The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. Plays the Mandalorian. He was in Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Well, I never saw The Great Wall because it looked terrible. What are the big ones? Like I said, Game of Thrones. He played Oberyn Martell. I can remember his name. Who was fantastic. He was fantastic in that. He will be in the upcoming Wonder Woman movie as Maxwell Lord. I believe he is the main overarching villain. I could be wrong because Kristen Wiig is playing a character who may be being set up as being a villain for the next movie. I'm not too sure. Anyhow, that's for another day. Today, we're talking about Prospect. So it's Pedro Pascal. He's awesome. Narcos. He was in Narcos too. Forgot to mention that on the Netflix. So basically, this movie, how to put this the best way? Well, actually, I'm going to ruin the whole thing for you. Basically, a teenage girl named C and her father Damon descend on a landing pod to a forested moon that's covered in poisonous spores to mine gems. The gems are found inside organic beings that are organic, I should say, kind of like living plant, like well, living plants, but they're like these semi-flesh creatures that are essentially have a rocky skin outer shell, and then have like sac things inside of them, and then when you cut them open, there's this gem that is surrounded by this fleshy material that if you expose it wrong, will then destroy the gem inside of it, and the gems are worth a ton of money. And so Damon and C are headed to this moon because they were hired by a bunch of mercenaries who have discovered something called the Queen's, not the Queen's treasure. What'd they call it? The Queen's lair? Yeah, I think is what it's called. Which is supposed to be this huge deposit of these gems they can get. And so they go down. There's something happens with the lander, and it semi-crashes away from the original landing spot, making them have to walk on foot to where they need to go. On the way there, they're ambushed by Ezra and his partner, which you never know the name of. Ezra being played by Pedro Pascal, of course. They during this, they only run into Damon. C is off hiding, and they start to rob Damon. Damon then tells him about the Queen's lair and says, "Hey, if you work with me, we'll split my fee, which is going to be a ton." And he's like, "Well, no, that's the myth." He's like, "No, I'm working with mercenaries, and it's real," and so on and so forth. So they start heading that way, and Damon tries to get a jump on him, grabs Ezra's gun. A gunfight ensues. C tries to help by shooting with a rifle. tagging the partner a couple times, but ultimately the partner turns, gets shot a couple times, and then ends up shooting her father, Damon, with a rail gun, which he dies of. And then, as extra measure, Ezra then picks up the pistol he was stripped of and shoots a couple times more. C runs away. She goes to the lander, tries to take off, realizes it's broken. Can't. Ezra shows up. She shoots him in the arm, holds him captive. He makes a deal with her that if he helps her, or she helps him, he'll help her get to the mercenaries and make their way off the planet or the moon. During this, you kind of get a little backstory on Ezra and the fact that he is also stranded here. His crew have essentially mutinied and left him there, and then he's been struggling ever since. And then you already know kind of a bit about C and her father. Her mother's dead. This is kind of this thing he does. So he's training her to do the same thing. And then they run into these, I guess you could say, sort of locals. They're not really indigenous. They are also humans or whatever species this is. And they go to barter for C when Ezra just wanted to get medical treatment and a filter, and they wanted C as well as to help him out. And then she runs off. We don't know what happens from there. He just says they weren't very hospitable after she took off. He's in a pretty bad shape. His arm is useless. He needs to cut it off before it kills him because it's being exposed to the poisonous spores in the atmosphere on the moon. So she helps him cut his arm off and treat it. And they make their way to the mercenaries. Mercenaries are a bunch of fucking psychopaths, as mercenaries should be. They have this guy in a box who's being punished for something, and I think he's being exposed to the poisonous spores. I'm not too sure. He's got a breather on, but you don't know much. His skin's turning pink. He ends up with a couple wounds because he gets shot a couple times, but they meet the mercenaries. The mercenary leader, played by Anwan Glover, named Micken. His character's name is Micken. Or Miken, I'm not too sure. It's Micken, right? Mikken, Micken. Or Mike Ken, I'm not too sure. Whatever. He tells them there's no way. One of the other guys says, "Hey, if we do this, they can probably get on the ship." And he's like, "All right, well, get to digging." So they're having a hard time because now that Ezra is missing an arm, he can't really perform as well, and so they can't secure these gems as well as they should, and they've gone through a couple of them, and he's getting frustrated, and so then C tries to help. She botches one, and he's about to fucking be like, "Hey, I guess you're useless to me. Prepare to die." Ezra cuts his Achilles on one of his legs. He falls, bashes his head into one of the creatures in the ground, which then eats his face, killing him. The others come over. There's a gunfight. They kill one of the guys, or they think they do. Actually, I think they kill one of them, and then they're chased by what's her name? Well, Sheila Vand is the actress's name. Inuman, I guess, is her character name. Anyways, she chases them in there. They devise a plan to get her. They get her, but Ezra is wounded. He tells C to run. She runs off, runs into the one of the other guys, the mercenaries. He's shooting at her. The big guy who got freed in the scuffle beats him to death and breaks his face open. I think he's eating him or he's picking his suit apart. I'm not too sure when she comes back. But she runs off with stuff, goes back to Ezra, helps him patch up the wound he got, and then they go back to the ship and they take off. Essentially, end of movie. So, yeah, that's it. Talk a little bit about the movie itself. Very low budget. It's I don't know the budget. I just know it was independent. It was premiered at South by Southwest. The movie is gorgeously shot. Interesting way of doing things. Tremendous set pieces. Costuming is fantastic. The location they shot in, which I don't even know where it's at, was very alien looking. And they did this cool thing to show you the spores in the air. They had this after effect they used that would catch the light and give you these lens flares, but there's always this hue of it everywhere, and it's this purplish pink mist in the air that obviously eats away at flesh and does bad things, but is also being produced by plants on this moon. So it's very interesting. You don't really know what year it is. We don't even know if these are technically humans. They don't know if they're from Earth. No one ever mentions Earth. But aesthetically fantastic. The suits that they wear are very practical, but also look like they could be space suits. So fantastic costuming. The visual effects, the only thing you have is the mist in the air. The really cool guns they use, because they're like energy guns of some sort. And then the view of the planet that the moon is orbiting around, and of course the spacecraft that they leave from and go to at the end of the movie. But yeah, I think that's really it for this this episode. Like I said, it's a fantastic movie. It's very fun. It's very intense at points. Very interesting setup and delivery for sure. Quite enjoyable if you like dystopian style movies, which I obviously do because I talked about them all this month. But yeah, that's it for this week's episode, everybody. We've been talking about Prospect, and that wraps up March's theme. Quick heads up for next month. It was kind of like a follow up to this. It's awesome sci-fi movies. Difference between sci-fi movies and space movies is none of these take place outside of Earth. All the ones for this month, the space movies were all in and around space. So that's the difference. These are just movies that happen to be on Earth, but they're sci-fi movies, and they are in order: Code 8, Upgrade, Source Code, Battle Los Angeles, and Cowboys and Aliens. So it'll be the order. So if you like to watch those ahead of time, I own most of these. Otherwise, I'm watching Upgrade on HBO, and Battle Los Angeles I have on Stars. The other ones I own because I bought Code 8, bought Source Code, and I bought Source Code when it came out. I've owned it for a while. And I owned Cowboys and Aliens since it came out because I actually really enjoy that movie. But yeah, that's it for this week's episode, everybody. Again, we are wrapping up March's theme of awesome space movies here on The Awesome with Cody. As usual, I'm your host, Cody. And like I said at the end of all these episodes, let's be awesome.